Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you all are doing fantastic out there in Cougar Nation. All right, let's talk about the transfer portal for BYU. We talked yesterday about what I want to see BYU target. Obviously, they need a big man to replace a guy like Fousseyni Traore. You need a 3-and-D defender, a true lockdown perimeter defender to replace Mawit Mag. I also believe you need to find pieces to come in and play off and around a guy like AJ Dybantsa. I still believe wholeheartedly that BYU will have a bevy of guys out there in the portal who will say, hey, BYU, I'm interested. And they should, because the nice part is BYU is showing well on a national stage, and having the top-rated recruit in the entire recruiting class coming in next year should have other players in the portal saying, hey, Provo Utah doesn't seem too bad. Hey, BYU, you interested in me? I'm interested in you. Now, are there guys out there that I'm already targeting? Yes, there are. First one I would be looking at is Joson Sanon. Now, he obviously has been very, very good down at Arizona State. BYU reportedly had interest before he ultimately landed in Tempe. I can't say at this juncture how much of what interest that he has in BYU, but I would be absolutely looking at him if I were the BYU Cougars. Now, the portal moves very, very quickly, and by the time some of you hear this podcast, some of these guys could be off the board. So take that with a grain of salt with regards to my thoughts on this, because once again, I'll say it once, I'll say it again. If you think that guys going into the portal means that it's the very first time that they're being contacted by coaches, okay, the coaches themselves and the direct contact with the player may be happening for the very first time, but in many respects, there's been contact made with AAU coaches, with parents, agents, behind the scenes, and in some cases, it can be going on for months before it is officially kosher to do this. I'm not saying that BYU is engaging in anything nefarious, because, to be honest, everybody across college basketball is doing this. You have conversations with people to get a gauge of, hey, is this player, if they were to go in the portal, what are they looking for? Those are the type of conversations you're having. You're not going out there saying, hey, this player goes in the portal. No, that's not what it's all about. It's more about, hey, what are you thinking? What are you looking for? And are you looking for X, Y, and Z? And then that conversation can go further. I'll reiterate something I have talked about previously on the podcast as recently as yesterday. That is, when these contacts happen with players, and sometimes it's truly the first time that they have been contacted by a coach, the conversations essentially via text messages are, hey, I'm coach so-and-so from X university. We're interested in potentially talking further with you via the phone, et cetera, maybe a visit, et cetera, about our program. Are you interested? That player says yes, you continue the conversation. That player says no, you say thanks for your time, and you move along. It's that quick. The courting process that can take months, if not years, in regular recruiting doesn't exist in the transfer portal. So yeah, Joson Sanon, absolutely a guy I'm looking at from Arizona State. You have to look very far beyond Logan for another guy that I would be tracking if I were BYU, and that's Mason Falslev. Now, Mason is a former all-state performer in football and basketball, ultimately signed with Utah before going on a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, returned home, and ultimately opted with the turmoil with the Utah basketball program to go to Utah State, and has been a very, very good player for the Utah State Aggies. Being a native of Smithfield, if I recall correctly, I don't know how eager he is to leave home, essentially, and maybe go to BYU. But if I'm BYU, I'm contacting that kid. He has proven capable of being a lead guy, but also a fantastic complement. And I said it before, BYU needs complementary players, because AJ Dybantsa is coming in here, and he is going to be the lead dog for the BYU basketball program, at least at this juncture. Things could change in that respect, but everything it feels like BYU's doing to build up next year's roster is integrating pieces around AJ Dybantsa to be the featured player for the BYU basketball program. Could that turn some of these veterans off with the BYU basketball team? It sure could, but I think they also understand the level of player that he is. We're talking a generational type talent. There are people out there who are comparing AJ to some of the best NBA prospects in recent memory. They really think he is that level of a player. And if he truly is that type of a guy, we're talking about a player who's going to come in and, as an 18-year-old, is going to dominate college basketball and dominate headlines, and could lead BYU to some really, really high-level stuff in basketball. And that should be exciting to you as a Cougar fan, but it also requires, I think, a deft touch from Kevin Young to build this roster because he doesn't want to run guys off. He doesn't want to have guys upset with their roles out there when it comes to what they're expected to do in the BYU basketball program. But there also has to be that ability for him to say, guys, that's AJ Dybantsa. He is everything that we could have hoped for, and he is going to be the guy that if we think we can get over the hump and make a run at a Final Four next year, a national championship, we've got to complement what he's capable of doing. I don't expect AJ Dybantsa to be anything other than that. And could I be wrong about who he is and what he is as a prospect? Sure, but he is shown at the elite prep level because he has spent the better part of his high school career playing for NIL deals, playing for basketball factories. That's what programs like Prolific Prep and Utah Preparatory Academy are. They're boarding schools, but they are basketball academies of the highest order. They're the best basketball outside of college hoops in the country. You're playing against guys you're going to see now. Darren Peterson, for example, I think he's at Prolific Prep where AJ came from to Utah Prep. Darren Peterson's been challenging AJ all season long for that #1 title. Speaking of the top prospect in the recruiting class, well, he's going to Kansas. So you could have some absolutely epic battles between the Jayhawks and the Cougars with those two guys who figure to be in the top 5 of next year's NBA draft, speaking of 2026, doing battle on the court and could be the lead guys for the respective programs who have already got very, very talented rosters in their own right, speaking of BYU and KU. It's crazy to consider what the transfer portal could yield for BYU. Could it yield top-tier talent that both complements and even enhances what AJ Dybantsa brings to the table? You sure hope so. But Kevin Young, he has got a good thing rolling here. And I think the biggest thing he's got to manage is making sure that he doesn't screw up the chemistry of the roster. And that's a tough thing to gauge in this day and age because let's be honest, you got NIL in play. You've got revenue sharing coming into effect for college basketball players in addition to college football. Schools will pay these players directly, and the inequity that exists due to you're making this amount, this guy's making this amount, it can cause problems. But I think the biggest thing Kevin Young needs to do is help guys understand that, yes, a guy like AJ Dybantsa is reportedly going to make north of $8 million. Great. Guess what? That dude is him, to use the parlance of the day. And we need to enhance everything we can to help him lead us to the promised land, whatever we hope to accomplish. And I think the ultimate goal is a national championship. It's going to be interesting. And the portal, I don't for the life of me get why they're opening it now. They actually moved it back weeks. Remember, it opened last year, the week of the NCAA tournament tipping off. That's obviously way too early. I'd still would like to maybe see it pushed back even a week later, maybe into where the Final Four is going on. But alas, this is the circumstance the BYU's in, and it's their job to go out and find talent. So the guys like Joson Sanon, Mason Falslev, should they be available and should they have interest in BYU? I think BYU should have interest in them, and we'll see where it ultimately plays out. But there is a lot on the table here for BYU, obviously, coming off what has been a breakthrough season this year under Kevin Young in his first year at the helm of the BYU basketball program. But it feels like there's still more to go. And a couple of you mentioned it. I think I've been Post Jimmer, our good friend Steve Pierce, who said that we have seen culmination of teams in the past where getting to a Sweet 16 feels like it's the culmination of years of hard work. It feels like right now, BYU Sweet 16 berth and anything else they accomplished this season, it's the beginning of something special. It's like kind of the beginning of something versus the culmination of something. And that's an exciting prospect if you're a BYU Cougar fan.